So welcome back to NDA, everybody. Thank you for all the love on the last few weeks' episodes. It's been great hearing so much good stuff on socials. Make sure you subscribe. I'm going to put that up front today rather than hiding it at the back end of the episode. So this week, the ND in NDA actually stands for neurodiversity. I've had so many people reaching out asking us to discuss this topic, what it's like to be creative or be in the industry while being neurodiverse or neurodivergent. I'm going to be doing some learning today. It's not a topic that I know loads about. Can't wait to hear from my lovely guests, very qualified. They're going to share their experiences, talk about how their neurodiversity impacts their creativity or things like being part of a team, explain some of the language and the terminology, which I think will be super helpful for us all. They've also shared some advice on how I can best facilitate today's discussion. Fingers crossed I do a good job of that. In fact, a couple of them have said good luck. So let's hear who's joining us. Anna, if you could just quickly introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. I'm Anna Jacks, and my pronouns are she, her, and I'm a freelance illustrator who's currently based in Bristol. I guess I'm going to talk about how freelance has benefited me, but also how it's been quite hard at the same time. So, yeah.
Cool, brilliant. Daniel, how about you?
Hi, my name's Daniel Edwards. My pronouns are he, him. I'm founder of a company called Bloody Lovely Branding Co. And we're striving to be the only, begrudgingly so, the only neurodivergent branding agency. So we're based in the Midlands.
Perfect. Lucy?
Hi, I'm Lucy Hobbs. I'm autistic and ADHD. I'm the founder of the Futures ND, which is a neurodiverse network for the creative and tech industries, which I organise events for. And from doing that, I also do neurodiversity consultancy work in organisations where I help with HR policies, ND at work guides. I write content and stuff like that for that. And I'm also a freelance creative director, so I do lots of different things, which it's very ADHD actually. And today I can talk about anything, but you're probably going to have to ask me to stop talking because I can talk a lot. So thank you for inviting me on today. Pleasure to be here.
Oh, no worries at all. We're so glad to have you. And certainly not last, but certainly not least, Ali, how about you?
Hi, I'm Ali. My pronouns are she, her. So I'm currently design director for global branding and packaging agency Chase Design Group, but I've also spent quite a large proportion of my career in design as freelance as well, so I guess I'm looking at it from both sides of that and how the pros and cons work with that really, so yeah.
Awesome. I'm Katie Cadwell. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm here to listen, ask questions. Got some really interesting stories and insights from the DMs, so I'll be reading those out as well today. So I think it makes sense to kick off with a little bit of context. So Lucy, as our kind of resident expert, having been in this field for a long time and also having been diagnosed for a long time.
So I will do that. Yeah.
I'm gonna give you that title too today. I wonder if we could just start with terminology. That there are a few different phrases around neurodiversity. So how do you like to be described? How do they differ?
Yeah, it's a difficult one because people like to put, even though we talk about not putting people in boxes, that there's so many overlaps. It's actually the exception rather than norm to be diagnosed with one thing. Like myself, I was diagnosed with ADHD like 15 years ago, and I found out I was autistic like 2 years ago. So, people tend to call themselves neurodivergent or neurodiverse. Neurodivergent is more grammatically correct, but some people prefer the term neurodiverse because they feel uncomfortable with the word neurodivergent, but there's a lot of arguments about this as well. But what's wrong with just saying I'm ADHD or I'm autistic? Some people might say I have ADHD, but there's also the first person language where people would prefer to say I am autistic rather than I have autism, because when you say I have something, it feels like it's something that isn't part of you, you want to sort of like get rid of or eradicate. So it's really up to the individual, and there's a lot of discussions on it, and I think it's still evolving. So
Yeah. And if someone isn't neurodivergent, how would you refer to that person or a group of people that aren't?
It's difficult because we could say neurotypical, but there is actually no such thing as neurotypical. And the thing is with the word neurodiversity, the reason that that word was what it's meant to mean is meant to mean that everybody has a different brain. So if everyone has a different brain, then no one is neurodivergent and no one is neurotypical. We all are very different. You see what I mean? So it's a kind of a contradiction in terms. It's very difficult as well when I'm writing sort of work guides and talking about language to make it all make sense in a way. So
yeah. Oh, I think that's really interesting, and I think that there's probably a little bit of reticence for people that don't have much knowledge in mislabeling or offending by introducing someone as ADHD. So it's good to know that impetus kind of needs to come from the person themselves. But I'm just wondering, do we have any statistics of it's pretty broad brush, and I know research is patchy in the creative industries at best, but statistics on how many people are neurodiverse in the creative industry, or what that looks like?
So in the general population, it's thought that 1 in 7 of us are neurodivergent in some way, which is conditions like ADHD, autism, dyspraxia, dyslexia, kind of specific learning differences. But in the creative industry, I did find out a stat from Creative Equals, actually a quality standard. They said that creative, data science and account management departments, as well as senior leadership, are 20 to 30% neurodivergent. So it does tend to index high in the creative and tech industries. And also I worked on a BEMA report for diversity in tech, and that showed that it indexed high as well. So I think it's definitely an industry that neurodivergent people get drawn to, lots of dyslexic designers who are very visual, tech, autistic people, ADHD people, lots of ideas, big ideas. I know lots of creative directors that are probably ADHD, but they don't even know it themselves. It's there's a lot of people in the creative industry, and we can go on and obviously talk about how difficult the creative industry can be to work in anyway. And then if you have a disability, a hidden disability, it can be really difficult to navigate. Yeah,
awesome. Okay, great. I'm really excited to hear a little bit about everyone's sort of individual experience. So if we kick off, Anna, I'm going to put you on the spot, please, if you don't mind. Yes. I just want to hear your story, hear your background, hear about your neurodiversity, and maybe some of the kind of challenges that you've faced.
Yeah, sure. I am ADHD. I've never heard that before, so that's really interesting. I've normally always said I have. I'll start saying that now. But and I got diagnosed in 2020. But I started freelancing when I graduated in 2015. And I was always working full-time in hospitality and then freelancing on the outside, which I didn't really find difficult because my brain was very focused on just trying to illustrate anyway. And I then eventually reduced my hours to part-time and freelance part-time. Sorry, I've forgotten the question.
No, all good. So when you went full-time to freelance, were you already diagnosed? Is that something that happened while you were full-time?
Yeah, no, it happened. So when I first went full-time in 2018, it was the first time I'd had a life without structure. So obviously I'd always been in higher education or hospitality work or retail work where I was told exactly what I needed to do. And I think as soon as I went into a studio, having to sort out my own routine and schedule, I just completely had no idea what to do. And my planner, like everyone would always be like, just get a planner and you'll be able to figure out what you need to do and prioritize. And I would almost have a list of things that would be like, write an email, get sketches done, go to the post office, and I'd open it and not be able to prioritize a single thing. And if anything, it made it harder to actually do anything at all. So I think after a year of doing that and not being able to do anything very well, I looked into autism first, because I found communicating really difficult as well. and eventually got diagnosed in 2020, but started looking at it in 2019, and it took an entire year to even go through the diagnosis process because it was so overwhelming and ginormous. So since getting the diagnosis, it's definitely helped a lot more because I know when to strip things back if I'm doing too much, because I tire myself out really, really quickly. Whereas before, I just saw it as like, I need to do as many things as possible, otherwise I won't succeed, which eventually just turned into a lot of burnout. And obviously if you're freelancing, you can't produce anything or produce anything well if you're mentally exhausted. And there was a lot of like I was getting very strange like physical pains as well, and I think it was because I had so much tension and anxiety in my body from constantly trying to keep on top of things, that I was getting really bad back pain and being told there's no reason for that. And so there was a lot of things physically as well that were stopping me from being able to work due to ADHD, but I didn't realise. Yeah.
Awesome, thanks for sharing. So I think we'll just maybe jump to a slightly opposite experience almost, or not saying that you can't relate to any of that, Ali, but you are in a studio at the moment, and you've in your career kind of dipped in and out of studios and in and out of freelancing. So can you just give us a bit of background to that path?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I think so much of what Anna's just said I could resonate with massively, actually. And I think it is that sort of self-discovery element of how, like Anna said, like when you come out, you know, you have this very structured like education system, and then when we get out of that, but even to be honest at university, where, you know, you're very much in control of your sort of workload, and yeah, you have your deadlines, but you know, you still have to sort of, you know, you have to manage that to a point. And I think it started to become really apparent to me that I was a bit faulty when it came to how I approached like my sort of like procrastination, then crunch time, like deadline working. And but because I guess I'm classed as like high functioning, it went completely under the radar because I could always pull it round. And so then it just became about me masking how I was working in, like when I was in studio roles, like full-time roles, I would, you know, get good at masking when I was procrastinating and when I was, you know, and generally it would go unnoticed or that they didn't really mind because I was always really good at delivering at the end. So, you know, and I think that's partly why a lot of neurodivergent people thrive in creative industries, is because there's that there is that flexibility in a lot of ways in how you know, everyone takes different approaches. There's no one way to attack a brief or solve a problem or, you know, anything like that. And I think that's probably why so many of us have found our way in these kind of industries where there's room for that to happen. So yeah, I think you know, even as a freelancer, I was, you know, mostly I would freelance within studios. So again, it was never like I had, you know, there were still those deadlines and things that, you know, and having to mask and all of that kind of stuff. So I think, yeah, it's very much like as you get further up, you know, once you get to a point, you know, in life where you're juggling and spinning many plates, that's when they say things like ADHD and autism can really, you know, become problematic and overwhelming because like when it's untreated and undiagnosed, because it, you know, we exactly like Anna said, you end up getting burnt out and it's just not sustainable long term. And, you know, once you've got many other life things, like if you're a parent and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, it just becomes to, I think, a point where you can't keep going like that.
Yeah. So I'm just going to jump to you, Daniel, and you work for yourself, obviously, but just be interesting to hear how you got there and how you kind of sussed out that was the best environment for you to work in.
Yeah, so my diagnosis was quite early, quite recent, May of this year. And prior to that, I had no knowledge. So I didn't even know ADHD was a lifelong condition. Didn't realise all my friends had ADHD. Like we seem to, we're like magnets. So you're like, oh yeah, I've got this. And then you feel alone and isolated. And then everyone's like, oh yeah, me too. But I just found out really, really late. So I started the business in 2020, just before a pandemic, like perfectly timed. But the main reason for doing that was because I was done with 10 years of working in sort of medium-sized enterprises, focusing on brand, even though I wasn't supposed to be. That was always the passion. And I hated the bureaucracy. I hated the process. I hated most of the people I worked with, if I'm honest, because I was just so different, and I was treated that way. I knew I was different, and I've always celebrated that, and that's always been me. But it's always like jarred and grated with most other people, specifically people in sales. No offense. So I started I started the business in 2020, again completely unaware, and I thought, right, that's it. If all these people can run a business, I certainly can. So I quit, and then I quickly realised that although I got rid of all the bureaucracy and all the frustrations, and I could structure my time and start work at 10 and be lazy, I actually then found that there were some consistencies that I haven't been able to kick for 10 years. What I would later find out was I haven't been able to kick for my entire life, and it was really the space that working at my own pace and to my own structure allowed me to realise these symptoms. And the irony was that I was looking for productivity hacks, because I'll use the term neurotypical just for like clarity on this, but I was like, all right, I can't focus, I can't seem to manage tasks, it's because I've got so many things on and blah blah blah. And then I found someone on LinkedIn, Jack, who was doing a video sort of diary for 5 days on ADHD and the challenges and some of his hacks and how he deals with it. And I was like, what a place to get some productivity hacks from, someone who like literally struggles with these things every day, and like me. And then by day 5 I was like, oh. So October 21 I was like, I have ADHD, and then but there was this really weird thing where I didn't feel like I could accept that, even though I knew it deep down. I couldn't accept that until I had diagnosis, and I thought diagnosis would be this big revelation. There'd be tears and I'm free. And actually it was like, you have ADHD, and it's like, I know. It's blatantly obvious now, because the process is quite cathartic in terms of you go through so much detail of your life, and you actually challenge the perceptions that your parents kind of project onto you. So I was always this amazing child that can do loads of amazing things. And in contrast to my brother, who's also just recently been diagnosed with ADHD, my brother had a very different experience. So he was always the child that needed extra care. And I was just this child that was excelling. I'd taken radios apart at 3 and putting them back together and stuff. And so I was kind of like put on a pedestal a little bit. So I took that mindset throughout most of my life, and then ended up realizing through the diagnosis process that actually I was a child really struggling. Like my mum kept everything. So I was like, Mum, I need some reports to kind of get an idea of what I was like as a child, because I can't really get any perspective of that myself. I read through it and I was just so sad. Because you see, we've all got an inner child we're looking after, and I could just see every single report was like, Daniel's exceptional, he's very good at this and that, but he needs to focus now, and exams are coming up, and he needs to stop daydreaming, and he needs to, and it's just and it's sad now knowing why, because before it was just a failure. So the two things really that it's given me is the ability to be compassionate towards myself for the first time in 32 years. I've been brutal with myself. And then the second one is to be able to ask for help, because I've always felt like everyone else is doing this. Life is really hard, but it's hard for everyone. So at least it's equal. Some people have actually got it worse than me. And then to fight, and so it was really quite shattering in a way. And I'm still trying to pull back the pieces of what is me, and what makes me, and what is just symptoms. And it's like someone pointing out oh, you find this really difficult and no one else does. And that's like so every time I struggle with something, I'm like, it's ADHD. And I'm really in a place now where I'm trying to kick that, because, I'm trying to run a business and trying to grow a business, and that passion is still there. But I've got to try and, manage the personal life and the business, but they're so interlinked. Like, there's no separating them. I think especially with neurodivergence, there's the reason that I'm doing the niche that I'm in, so branding, is because I think I've masked all my life, and I'm just like very empathetic. I understand people's perspectives. So like, it's just anthropomorphizing a business, right? So like, we're making a business seem more human. And I think, it's just that path is, I'm losing it now. So I'm gonna curl off what I'm talking about. But yeah, that's pretty much my story. So 2 years in, I'm like, since May, I've had to start again and refocus. And that's really where I pivoted the business, because I always wanted to just help people. That was again, before diagnosis, it was, I just want to help people who do good do more. Like, it's as simple as that. And now I understand why, because for me, if I'm not passionate about something, good luck getting me doing it. Like, there's no chance. I have to love what I do, and I have to feel impact. I want to pass on and help other people with the skills I've got. That's where I'm at.
I could listen to you chat for ages.
Dan, I could talk for a lot longer.
I'm gonna come to you, Lucy. I think it would be impossible, honestly, because you've been kind of in this world for a while, to kind of sum up all of your experiences. But it would be cool maybe to try and pinpoint one of the main challenges that you've experienced, and then maybe, because I'm going to segue onto some slightly more optimistic topics, maybe one of the main approaches that you've seen, or one of the main changes you've seen since you've been diagnosed.
Sure. So you want me to talk about one of the challenges in the workplace
Yes, please.
Do you know what? I didn't prepare this question, but just let me think around this, because just listening to everyone else there, this is really interesting, because as a freelancer myself, I've been working as a creative for 20 plus years now. Actually, like quite a few years anyway. But when I went for my ADHD diagnosis 15 years ago, the psychologist sort of said to me, you found the perfect job, haven't you? You're freelance, right? You work on short projects, having loads of ideas. You don't have to craft them, because I was very conceptual coming up with ideas. That's like the perfect job for someone with ADHD. I was like, oh yeah, that's interesting. But also, freelancing is challenging, because you have to like hit the ground running. You have to sort of like produce loads of work from day one, and you have to keep going. Even if you burn out, you don't get sick pay, right? And also tried to get full-time work, go for an interview. I'm just rubbish at the interview process. In the interview, I just go off on a tangent. I talk too fast. They probably think, who is this mad woman? We don't want, this is like, so, I was always going in between, like trying to get a full-time job and then thinking, no, freelance is great, let me do this. But there was never any, security. So that was anxiety all the time. And I actually did do an event about this, and it was about entrepreneurs and beyond the workplace. And what I found out actually was, just from researching, talking to people, that a lot of neurodivergent people aren't in full-time work. They are contract, and they have started their own businesses because they just cannot work in the workplace. And there's loads of challenges in the workplace. It's hard to think of one, but I think the biggest challenge is just fitting in to what's expected of you, because there is this kind of cookie cutter, whatever person that people expect you to kind of be in the workplace and behave in a certain way that we just don't fit into. So it's just difficult, and everyone's different. So it's different on lots of different, for lots of different reasons and things. But I will say one thing, that my biggest problem was open plan offices, I think. But also what's been interesting in, after COVID and the lockdown, is a lot of neurodivergent people really thrived when they worked from home, because they could create their own environment. They didn't have to put up with noise and like traveling on the tube and like busy, and all that kind of stuff. And I quite enjoyed it, you know, and it was quiet, and I could get on with my work, and all the time when I was doing my freelance creative work, having to go into agencies, I was always like, can I work from home? And it's like, no, you have to come in, and we're going to do brainstorms. Brainstorms are the most painful thing ever. I mean, I don't mind them with people that I know very well, or just but it's just, I can only bear it for about half an hour anyway. You know, so it's been amazing for me. I've been really productive, and I've spoken to other people that have enjoyed that as well, and been much more productive sort of working from home. And now, you know, sometimes I'll get creative work from an agency, but I can do it from home, you know, and I also have my own clients, and I can work my own, you know, my own day. And if I need to have a nap, I can have a nap. If I need to sort of sit in bed with my computer, which I do because it stops my anxiety, I can do that. You know, I go horse riding. I really look after my mental health, and being able to work to your own, you know, rhythms and everything is just really empowering, I think, for someone who's neurodivergent. Yeah.
Do you know what?
I'm just going to add in, Lucy, because that's so...
Okay.
Oh,
I was just
go for it, Ali.
Sorry, I just really, while that point is, I have the complete opposite experience of that in the pandemic, like in terms of, as an, you know, and obviously, and it was actually what probably triggered me getting my diagnosis. So I was only diagnosed 9 months ago with ADHD, and I think the pandemic played a huge role in that, because what I found was suddenly being put working at home. Let's take the fact that I was also trying to homeschool my children at the same time as doing a full-time job, but it was the fact that without, you know, being in a studio where I had to mask, like, and, you know, hide my procrastination and, you know, the way my really, like, sort of unhealthy work sort of cycle of procrastinating and then crunch time working and then just doing that over and over again till I got burnt out. I didn't need to mask it because I was at home. So, and then I had loads of other distractions around me. So I would, you know, be procrastinating, like doing like random DIY tasks that I didn't even need to do when I was struggling with a brief, because that's how I, you know,
do that as well.
You know, like honestly, it got completely out of hand for me, and it was just like I was just like, why can't I just sit at my desk and focus on the work? Like, why can't I just do that? And that's where it all started really for me. So yeah, I found the pandemic really hard. Like there was just, you know, I just didn't have to mask in the same way, because people weren't, you know, there looking at my screen, all of that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, the wheels fell off for me massively.
So that helped you to be productive.
So this is what got me there.
Yeah, sorry, just quickly, because so that helped you to be productive. But I've actually seen there's been a real kind of different people, you know, some people have thrived and some people haven't. And I've heard that story as well. Some people actually got the stats for diagnosis of ADHD went up massively in the pandemic, because it was just all about sitting at your desk at home, and people just couldn't do that. They weren't, and some people thrive more in the office, but that's what's really important as well. Everybody works differently, and everybody, you know, and I've found, and also there was this, it kind of proved the social model of disability. It's like the people that enjoyed and were productive more in the office were less productive at home, and the people that were less productive in the office were more productive at home. So it flipped the script. It was really interesting how it showed how environment affects people and how we are all so different.
Yeah, massively.
Honestly, the DMs have completely reflected what you're saying, which is there is no one size fits all. So I've heard people saying, being from home is the dream. I can't believe I have to go in. A lot of people saying that the music in studios is very, very distracting, and they find people walking past and clients coming in and the kettle going on and the music being so loud, really difficult, and feeling like they're in the minority and they don't want to speak up. And other people kind of parroting what you're saying, Ali, that they need to be in the studio to quickly run, especially if you're kind of dyslexic, to run decks by people and not wanting to constantly hassle people online, and the anxiety of not being able to like read someone's facial expression and reading messages. And so honestly, it just feels like the studios are and aren't working for everybody, and our working practices kind of are and aren't working. So this is so interesting, but I'm just going to jump to you, Anna, because I feel like you've got a really different point of view in that you have an agent, and I know you've had a couple of agents, so they provide like a kind of buffer, I guess, between you and the brief, you and the client. So can you chat about the two different experiences you've had?
Yeah, sure. So the first agent I signed with, I think, was in mid 2019, which was when I was just starting to realise I probably had ADHD. And before that point, I was doing everything with clients on my own. And I'd never felt like I'd struggled that much with it, but I think I had. And I think often when I'd go into like university talks, I'd always stress about, there was like a really anecdotal story I'd always tell where right after New Designers, I missed so many opportunities. Like there was a 3-book deal I missed, and like working with Women's Wear Daily and lots of other things. And it's because they'd come into my inbox and I would be like, that's great, I've achieved a thing, because they're there. And then I'd wait too long to reply, and then I would have missed the opportunity. And I thought that was a thing. Like when I'd say it and I'd look at people's faces, they'd all be a bit like, huh? Why would you wait like a week or so to reply to that? And I think it's because, I don't know, I think it's ADHD. I don't know why I did it. And I think it's because I thought I'd already achieved something without actually having to do any work yet. I don't know what it was. It was kind of like, reward system, and now on to something else. And with the agent, I think my main fear was them taking control of everything, which a lot of freelancers have anyway, because I thought I had it all together. And then even though me and my first agent weren't a great fit, the second that they did take over the entire admin side of everything, my brain capacity went from like 20% for drawing and creativity and just like went right up, and I could focus way more on things. I wasn't constantly thinking of all of the emails I had to reply to, all the negotiations, or oh my god, I've only got a week to do this, but I need about 5 weeks, even though I know I can do it in a day if I just sit down and don't move the entire. So it was really nice to have all of that taken away. But the issue I had with the first person I signed with was that I wasn't officially diagnosed, and I didn't know what I was going through either. And I think the idea of taking on multiple projects at once, which you have to do really often as a freelancer anyway, just immediately put my brain into like meltdown, and I couldn't think of doing anything. So it was really, really hard. And they would sort of be like, but you're an illustrator, this is what you need to do. You need to like take multiple things on at once, and that's always going to happen. You're going to have schedule crossovers. And so that was like a big difficulty I had. But now with the new one, and I've got the diagnosis and I've spoken through what I struggle with, it's really, really nice to have them go, oh, Anna has difficulties with scheduling her time, so if we could just create like an extra week just in case she needs it. But my agent is very aware that I don't need it, and probably relays that to the client as well. But that's been really helpful, and just it's been really nice as well also having somebody who, when the brief gets forwarded, if I read a sentence and misinterpret it, which happens very often, I have someone who can like call me and reassure me, no, it's this, this and this, you've just read it wrong. And I've been like, okay, that's great, thank you. So yeah, it's just been, it's been really helpful, and I think that it's helped me become a better illustrator in terms of drawing and ideas as well, which is really nice, because it's just taken off this entire, because I think when you're studying to be an illustrator in university, you don't think, oh, I'm now also being my own admin person. And that's stuff that I'd obviously never had to do before graduating. So the second that was introduced, I was like, whoa, I don't know how to like do all of this at once. And I did, but then I'd push myself too far and I'd be too tired to do anything else. So
can I just say something to
nice.
that?
I think it's nice to hear that
Sorry, Kate, I just wanted to quickly say something to that. That's really interesting. And I just wanted to say that, you know, we do have access to work, and people are neurodivergent, people are getting more and more VAs or virtual assistants, just so that is something that's available. Just wanted to mention that because that's fantastic, because are typically not very good at admin and all those kind of repetitive tasks and all the things that require a lot of executive function. So I just wanted to add that. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, that's such a good
No,
point.
all
And
good. That's
exactly,
what I was going to ask, to be honest. I wanted to ask about positive things you've seen, or like, I know, Daniel, for example, you're looking towards this future of building a studio that's super inclusive. Like, what are the practical things that you think you could see or have seen that have really helped?
I think just giving people space and understanding, regardless of like how they think or what holds them back. Like, intrinsically, everyone offers value. And I think once we get beyond this idea of disability and you know, oh, you're different to me, it's like we all have our drawbacks, and we're all good at certain things, and we all struggle and need support with others. So that's been the biggest like barrier I've seen, is this like blockade of thinking. It's almost like, oh well, we're all normal and we can get on with our job and you're not, and that's a liability. And it's like, well, I worked with many people who are liabilities. Like, it's not there's no sort of like line drawn with that. So what was the question again? Sorry.
If you're looking, I kind of looking to hear about examples of that you've seen that help, I guess. So that might be in a studio environment, or so like I think the virtual assistants are a really good one. But yeah, examples of things that have helped you do your work. Ali, I know you've been in studios that have like made that space for you and made changes.
Yeah, very much so. And I think that's where things like access to work comes in, like, and that's what getting an official diagnosis can facilitate. So I was able to, you know, I was open with my employers about my diagnosis, and then as part, because ADHD is recognised as a disability in the UK, so that then opens the door to things like you're able to ask for what they call reasonable adjustments that can make make being in a workplace more accessible to me as someone with a disability. And so that then meant I could ask for things like, I mean, we already did this at Chase anyway, but like flexible working hours, like things like, it sounds silly, but things like not needing to take notes in meetings, like, or people like recapping, you know, accounts people like sending me a written recap, like, so, because I will just forget, like, and I really struggle to take notes while I'm in a meeting, because if I'm taking notes, I'm not hearing the next thing that's being said. So I never could really cope with that whole thing, and then I'll forget, and then I'll miss things. And it's like, so just things like that are really helpful. And even just like, just from like an anxiety point of view, because obviously I think it's very much a comorbidity of like ADHD and autism things, is that we're naturally, we sit with a lot of anxiety, probably because of our human experience.
Performance anxiety as well, for the things that you say, because we're worried that we're going to miss something if we've got auditory processing disorder and stuff like that. And just to add to that, you know, these reasonable adjustments are required by law. So there's the Equality Act. So
they have to consider it.
They have to consider.
They have to consider it at least. And so, you know, and it's even just things like, you know, so, like my boss will say, can we just have a chat? It would be like tomorrow at 3:00, and then I'm literally for that whole day thinking I'm going to get fired, or you know what I mean. You're catastrophizing. You're like, what have I done wrong? What am I going to get told off about? So I saw this really great thing from a ADHD and autistic sort of influencer named Ellie Middleton, but it's the smallest little things like this though, but it's like her team will now say, oh, can we just have a quick chat about this tomorrow? Don't worry, it's nothing bad. Like, just in brackets.
You're not getting fired.
Just little thing like that is just means the world to people like us who have anxiety and will just like catastrophize. And I mean, it sounds really silly, but just little things like that make such a difference. And you know, that just sums up the things that, you know, it's just being able to, you know, adapt. And also it's that most reasonable adjustments that will make neurodivergent people more comfortable in the workplace actually will benefit everyone, like the flexible working hours, like having quiet breakout spaces, you know, like considering where you're siting people's desks, so not next to the kettle or next to where people are coming in and out of door, like all these things, it would benefit everyone. So it's actually within everyone's interest to be more inclusive to neurodivergent.
And it also creates a level playing field. So
I'd love to hear, Lucy, what you...
I was just going to say, it also creates a level playing field for everybody. And as you say, you know, everybody should have access to these, whether they have a diagnosis or not, because even if you... having a diagnosis is a privilege. Even if you don't have a diagnosis, you might have executive functions issues. You might go for a diagnosis and get a diagnosis, but you just haven't got 2 years to wait, and you just need some help right now. So, and also with access to work, you don't actually have to officially have a diagnosis. You can just explain your problem, and then they will support you.
Actually, Lucy, I just wanted to kind of elaborate on what you're saying. So if you have a business come to you in that sort of consultant capacity, and they want to look at their policy and they want to, you know, empower their HR to make it a more inclusive environment, what kind of things do you recommend? I know you write handbooks and things as kind of guidance, and I appreciate that they're probably chunky documents and it would be hard to summarize the whole thing, but just kind of practical things that you would kind of recommend.
Well, the most practical thing is, like, I mean, just loads of examples of reasonable adjustments, kind of talking about, you know, the strengths and challenges of different kind of neurological profiles, but we're all very different. There's lots of overlap. So kind of trying to outline the biggest strengths, so the biggest challenges that might need reasonable adjustments to make a level playing field, really. But a reasonable adjustment can be anything that's reasonable, you know. I mean, there's millions of them. It's hard, you know. I've
just made a reasonable adjustment request actually more recently. So again, it's not, you don't have to just put your reasonable adjustments in at the start and that's it. Like, as things crop up, you can make more requests. And so I'm actually currently signed off work at the moment with stress and anxiety, because I've had a lot going on in my personal life. Obviously, like we were saying, for neurodivergent people, it's really a lot harder for those not to spill over into each other. And so I think this has just come up for me as a thing, but, you know, and I think this is very common in the creative industries because it's a lot of small to medium-sized businesses. The sick pay and things like that are pretty poor. And I think I was trying to think, like, well, how can we give people who are struggling, like, more support when they are you know, are ill because of their disability or their neurodivergence and things. And so I've asked for a reasonable adjustment that they consider adding a disability leave policy into our contracts, so that there is it's all about that equity thing, isn't it? Because I think, you know, if you get a really extended sick policy, I think the worry for businesses is that people will exploit it. Whereas I think if you then add in this additional aspect of, like, a disability leave, then that does give the opportunity for people who are struggling to still, you know, to take the time they need to, you know, make themselves better and get better without the pressures of then, you know, having to go back to work when they're not ready because financially they cannot afford to take the time they need for their mental health or, you know, physical health as well. So it's just a shame it has to get to that, Ali, you know, because just very quickly, it shouldn't have to get to that. If they were supporting you how they should be, and how you need to be supported, and had more of an understanding of neurodiversity, you wouldn't have got to that point, because it's not just about the practical things like software. I think all companies should have all the software that you need, you know, the Dragon software, text-to-speech software, all that kind of thing. But it's also attitudes as well, and that can be really debilitating because people just don't get it or understand it. I think you're massively complaining for no reason and you're making it up, and, you know, there's this kind of thing, and you feel that. So it's very holistic, but it's a shame it should actually get you feeling like that.
Cool. So it's really interesting to hear everyone talk about I don't want to use the word concessions, adjustments is much better, adjustments that they can make in the workplace. Dan, you're starting a studio and then projecting to 5 years' time when you've got 20 staff and glossy studios and absolutely killing it. What does that look like for you? What does your space look like? And as a boss, what would you be doing to make your employees feel super comfortable that you kind of wish that you'd had and seen?
Yeah, so my experience comes from like not having any accommodations like made by myself or by employers, regardless of whether it was like blatantly obvious that I needed some support. There were things that some companies did, like gave me like I would never turn up on time, like I was late every morning, and I think there was flexibility there, and I only now see the actual impact of that in terms of they weren't bothered that I would turn up late, and it never became an issue, and therefore it was never an issue for me. I think if someone had put pressure on, you need to be in at 9, it would be it's a grind for an ND individual to get to work. Like, you're exhausted by the time you get to work in some cases, and then you've got to start your day. So one thing I've found is just I'm learning as I go. Like I think I wrote an article which was 32 years experience of something I know nothing about. So I'm learning what I need, what's a mask, what I thought was my work ethic and actually is just toxic. And that all of that links to like the burnouts that I have. So I'm just bringing a learning mentality that regardless of my perspective and my new understanding of myself, I don't know anyone else's. Every individual is unique. The key thing I'm trying to do is safeguard and try to. I'm working with someone else called Hannah, and she's autistic ADHD, and we're learning how we interact as creatives together, because we've burnt each other out. Like, so, in a month we knew everything about each other, like deep stories of personal troubles and joy and whatever else. I know so much about this person, and it's been now three months, but it's just she's helped show me that I need to continue to learn and constantly look and ask. Like, I think it comes back to culture, like being able to, Ali, you mentioned about the agency you work at is making adaptations for you. And that's amazing to hear that you're comfortable enough to be open, because I've had so many messages that are like, when I first found out, I posted and the post went viral, and it was a bit overwhelming, to be honest, but I was getting loads and loads of messages. I responded to literally hundreds. Every single one of them I responded to. And it was just such a pattern there of like, I can't speak about this. And I wish I could bring this up. And I'm like, it's a legal obligation. It's like, yeah, but it don't work like that. And when you look at the stats on like tribunals that have gone to court on like reasonable adjustments being made, like they're not very successful. No. So there's no real like even if like it's by law, it's only good by law if you can actually win a court case on it. And I mean, I might be wrong there, but the ones that I've seen, like there's just not much incentive to go through with it, and we struggle with like organizing ourselves and our lives. Like, can you imagine organizing evidence for a court case? Like, it's getting into work is probably the root of the cause. So I just try to keep an open mind, listen, and we're trying to just roll things in now, because there's no blueprint. That's the crazy thing. Yeah. Like, everyone's looking for like their only, especially in brand, we're the only one that does this. And I'm like really, really annoyed that we can claim to be the only branding agency that is employing and working with neurodivergent people, because it's like, why? Like, I think 20%. There's a government report on COVID and the impacts of neurodivergent people in the creative industry, and it's something like 20% of people in the creative industry are neurodivergent. I think 10% roughly in the gaming industry specifically as well. So like, as you niche down, like the percentages are really high, and having an open, and that's just the people who feel safe enough to talk about it and to expose it. So it's probably way higher, because there are so many toxic environments where people are shut down anyway. like, you know, sharing your feelings is a sign of weakness. You know, these are like not just business issues, but like society's issues. You know, sharing how you feel is a sign of weakness. Like what? Like it's the strongest people I know are the most open people, because like exposing yourself is putting yourself at risk of judgment and everything else. So yeah, I'm just trying. We're just trying everything that we can to make people feel heard. So like, I'm late to meetings constantly. So like, the closer I get with someone and the better the relationship I have with someone, the less it seems respect I have for them because I don't turn up on time. But it's not. It's just that you're no longer a risk to me. I feel comfortable around you. Therefore, you're not an impending doom. Like if it's a client, I'm there. I am prepped. I have decks. I have work done. Everything's delivered. Everything's on point. I know every single detail of every part of the project. I remember things that they've said from call number 1 6 months ago. But then when it comes to like, oh, can you pick up some milk on the way home? I'm like, no chance. Like, absolutely no chance. So it's just like accepting these things. And as long as you build a process that doesn't rely entirely on someone delivering every single part of something, that there's understanding that at times we're going to ebb and flow naturally, then there shouldn't be an issue. And that's beneficial for everyone, because everyone has issues at points. Everyone's personal life becomes overwhelming. Like this isn't just so just basically giving an open platform for people to share.
And like for me, I just wanted to add to that quickly that there's so much shame attached to all of that, and I think that's such a big part of the problem. And it was really interesting. I was chatting to a friend this morning actually, who is a design director at an agency in Prague, and we went to uni together, and he sort of said to me, you know, do you think we'll ever get to a point where you would put your ADHD diagnosis on your CV and it would be seen as a positive thing? And I was like, I'd love to get to that point, because actually I know there's been a lot of focus on the negative sides of being neurodivergent, but a lot of my best qualities and my favorite things about myself are because I'm ADHD, like the high empathy, the, you know, perfectionism, the you know, oversharing, but I think to a point that people will warm to me and will, you know, are comfortable sharing with me, and that creates a better work environment for everyone if people can talk more and be more open. And so, you know, there's lots of really positive things about it, and I feel like the more we sort of like, I think, you know, really crush those sort of like really archaic views of what ADHD is, and
about all the disorders and everything.
Like,
I just wanted
it needs a rename. It needs a rebrand, doesn't it? Because attention deficit is not the right word.
This is exactly why I started up the Futures ND, to get people to talk about it, and so I've got a leaders event coming up in November, because I want to get leaders talking about it, to inspire people to talk about it. And I've noticed, you know, like Dan, as you were saying with your post about coming out about it, a lot of people have been doing this recently, and they've got a lot of engagement, and a lot of people want to see that, because they're hiding it. So the more people are open about it, the less toxic our culture will become. Because I reckon that a lot of leaders have got something, but they're not being open about it, and it's affecting their work, and it's affecting the way they treat their staff. So there needs to be so much work, more. I mean, it's becoming more and more, you know, people are becoming more open, there's more awareness around it, but there's still a lot of work to be done.
I want to,
Lucy,
like,
you're really upfront. Sorry, Ali. You're really upfront about.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you again.
No, all good. No, it's all good. I just before you jump in, I just want to ladder on that point. You're really upfront about your kind of diagnosis, and obviously wear the Futures ND very proudly on your sleeve. Were you that open 15 years ago when you got diagnosed? How has it changed how you've talked about it? And you must have witnessed great change about how people feel about it in that time.
I've gone from one extreme to the other. So I used to, when I got diagnosed as ADHD, I used to go into freelance. I would never say anything about it. I would mask, I would try and hide. I would like just be really productive, do the work, and in meetings be like, yes, say yes to everything, and, you know, never complain and everything. And then I got invited to speak. I told somebody in the industry that I was ADHD, and they invited me to speak at a this conference, Diverse Minds Conference in 2018. And I was like, I sat there on a panel in front of all these people, and it was going to probably be on social media what I said. And I talked very openly about my experience as a creative with ADHD. And then I just thought, well, there's no going back now. So that's why I created the Futures ND, because I was open about it. It's like, and also at that conference, I met a lot of people like me that had been hiding away, that hadn't spoken about it, that felt like me. And before that, I didn't know anyone in the industry with ADHD apart from John Allison, that had been open about it at Channel 4, and he's actually spoken at one of my events. Anyway, I thought this conversation needs to carry on. We need to be more open about this, and that's why I do the work I do. Yeah.
I think the more open
awesome.
we are about it is that, so I shared my whole diagnosis journey on it was my personal Instagram account, but obviously there's a lot of people in the industry because of, having been freelance and everything. And the amount of people that were coming to me in my DMs and saying, I really think I've got ADHD, and then I think I'm on about 5 people off the back of me talking about my journey have since got their diagnosis. Also, I think it's really important to point out that this comes from a place of privilege, that the NHS waiting list for diagnosis is years. And so I'm very privileged that I was able to afford to go private to get my diagnosis, as are the certain people that have had it off the back of that. So I think that's really important to note, that it's not accessible to a lot of people.
And my heart goes out to all those
when
people
they need it.
There's a lot of people out there that don't have a diagnosis, that are probably on antidepressants. They're suffering with anxiety and depression, and they probably could have something underlying. And when they discover that, they can really kind of get in touch with what really drives them and what they need. And that's so important, because I think a lot of mental health issues could boil down to this. There's a lot of mental health platforms that talk about mental health, but they don't even talk about neurodiversity. And it's like they're definitely missing something, because there's something, there could be something that's underneath that, and that's they're just treating the symptoms and not the cause.
Yeah.
That was very similar to my experience. So I've spent 10 plus years treating and trying to understand why I was depressed and anxious. And, back in university, that was like a major type. It's upheaval, isn't it? It's your life changes. You become this adult. You get bills and everything else to handle. And I was suicidal twice, and luckily came through it all. But the whole time, I was literally down the path of have I got bipolar? Because there's quite a considerable amount of crossovers. So I just had no help at any point, no clarity. Every professional I went with. So I've always had a trust issue with the medical industry, and I got diagnosed and found out about ADHD through LinkedIn and
That's
Instagram
incredible.
videos.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah. I think it's
Doesn't that go to show that the how open people are and how transparent they are is changing? And like you all mentioned, there's been a great wealth of information being shared, especially through the pandemic, because I think that really opened people's eyes. Honestly, this is just amazing, but I really, really want us to talk bring some of that real positivity about what it means to be neurodivergent and how that makes us all brilliant creatives. So I'm going to go to you, Anna, if that's okay, and ask, and it's so difficult to separate you and your creativity, and I understand that it's unbelievably nuanced, but how do you think your ADHD makes you a better creative?
Well, it's interesting because I feel like the points that I've been thinking about have kind of been mentioned already, but I to begin with found this really hard, because I was like, when you initially asked me before we spoke about this, I was like, I don't know what's been good, but I think it's just since the diagnosis you do that thing when you reflect and are like, oh, all these sad things happen, but actually to get to where I am now, I did a lot of good things because of having ADHD, which I'm really happy about. And when I first got diagnosed, I sort of was like, oh, it's because obviously the industry where everyone knows about grind and hustle culture, and I feel like when I was very first flung into the industry, that was really kind of celebrated, and I was very easily able to adapt into all of those things because of ADHD, and it's things like, because And I do genuinely think that for me, illustration has been whatever my hyperfixation is this. And that's like the main reason that I've ever been able to just come out of university and just go, this is it now, and continue on that path. And obviously, hyperfixations can be really hard because there's like this constant dialogue that's happening, even when you're trying to rest and things. But I do think that I was able to concentrate so much on something that I loved that I've managed to succeed in it. And in the way that, because I got combined type, so I struggle with impulsivity but also inattentive, but I'm glad to have that mix of things, because I think that there's a really gentle side of me, but there's also a really like outgoing side that's really, I can communicate well even though I don't think I can, and it's meant that I've said yes to a lot of things that typically illustrators wouldn't want to because they're quite shy and introverted. So like I love my studio of illustrators, but we're all very shy and quiet people. But it's meant that I've gone to exhibit work on my own and talk to industry creatives or go on panels and all of this stuff. And I kind of feel like if I didn't have that part of me, I wouldn't have been able to achieve as many things as I have. And I also think,
do you see it reflected in your work at all? So how, you get a brief, do you think how you approach that brief or ideas you have, or do you think it impacts how conceptually you think?
I think it does, yeah, but I think it's more so not actually on paper. It's more because I've got this constant thinking happening, which is really nice because it means you'll just walk around and then you'll see something and go, oh, a stone. And then you're like, oh my God, stone. Oh my God, this and this and this and this. And I think that there's rocks outside my house. That's why I did that. But I don't know. Sometimes I think the connection to things for me might not be the same thought pattern as other people's. And I was looking really briefly before coming onto this call, because I remember in university, one of my lecturers got really frustrated with the way that I saw colour. And I don't know if it is linked, but there'd been quite a lot of studies about how people with ADHD sometimes perceive colours differently, like contrasts or hues. And I remember my lecturer used to get really frustrated and said that I saw it incorrectly, but the way that I use colour in my work is one of the main things that clients approach me for. So yeah, things like that are really nice.
I think it's really interesting because there's stark... ADHD for me is like completely hypocritical. It's like all or nothing. I can't do a simple task, but then I can do like this insanely complex task really well. And so I think we've focused a lot on the negatives, and I know we're trying to pull on the positives, but they're almost mirrored. So like all the bad stuff we talk about having to hide away and mask and whatever else, but we're also like extremely self-reflective and open people as well, or I am specifically. So like but then in certain environments, like in a conversation with more than one person, I'm like a mouse, but with one person I'm completely open and I tell them about everything. I think like one challenge I face with labeling my like the business and the positioning as like a neurodivergent agency is trying to overcome this idea that actually you just that's nice of you. It's like, no, there's like intrinsic value. This is a strategic business decision because I will have a competitive edge with a studio full of neurodivergent people because divergent thinking is the backbone of the creative industry. Like literally linking ideas and thoughts that have never been linked is how you get a good effective campaign. Like it's the same with a joke. Like it's connecting two similar topics that you're aware of and familiar with in a way you've never felt it before, and it fires a new synapse in your brain and you're like, ooh, endorphins and dopamine. So like that's what it's all about. Like we're empathetic, so we understand things from the perspective of a client or from a customer. We can put ourselves in their shoes, and when we get off the call we're constantly thinking about it. We're like, oh, how would they experience this? And we're just like we like meander through our thoughts. We're very visual. And like that's such an advantage in the creative industry to be able to do that. But also, it comes with the trade-off then that being able to just sit down and watch a film. I didn't realise that most people can probably sit and watch a film and just watch it and be like, oh, that was all right. I'm like, wow, look at the grading on that shot. Like, oh, what a pan. This is a single shot. Like, I'm just, so like, until I'm sleeping, I'm thinking about everything. Yeah. And I have to be, it's an amazing skill when it comes to creative, but it's also very dangerous if you don't treat yourself well and give yourself space and time. And I think that's the core root of the problem with not having the label is you're unaware of this. So you can quickly get into a cycle of like negative thoughts, things like that. Yeah. And, you know, without the help of like CBT and things like that, like I hated CBT when I did it. I thought, this is useless. 6 months later, I'm like, I just caught a negative thought pattern. And I'm like, damn, CBT, it works. So yeah, I think it's just ongoing support and trying to like learn more about yourself. And there's just constant learning, which we're naturally good at anyway, which is a good thing, I suppose.
Talking about the positives, I just wanted to say something like this is a big one for ADHD, right? Mind wandering and being curious is a way of being creative and coming up with ideas, but also the double-edged sword of that, the negative of that is being distracted really easily and like looking around when you're when you're meant to be concentrating, right? So you can't have one without the other. So that's you will, as we were saying, these strengths, they do have their disadvantages, but we have to support both sides of that to be our best selves.
And I think like it's important to recognize like, the high empathy as well. Like when you get to like director level, like it's so valuable to have people like that. But
the high empathy also gives you the sensitivities and the anxieties, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
But it's but I think it's so important for people, empathetic people, to be in those higher positions so that it is fostering a more sort of like tolerant environment and a more open environment for more junior members to not feel like they have to hide their struggles, and that it's okay to say, if you're to hold your hand up and say, I'm having a really hard time at the moment, and that then gives your company opportunity to support you. And I just think that's so valuable from a pastoral side of things, not just from a creativity side.
That's exactly why people
Ali, I agree so much.
Neurodivergent leaders, basically, to lead companies and departments. Yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
I'd love to just recognise that everyone here is in a position where they can talk really openly, either because we're at leadership level or working for ourselves. Yeah. And there is, when you're more junior in an agency and you're cutting your teeth and you're trying to fit in, there are people out there really experiencing those barriers right now. So I spoke to a lovely, glorious junior designer who I'm trying to convince to come on an episode. And he said, if you hire people who think in a different way, you're going to make different work. Yeah. And he really felt like he was just figuring out his voice in that, but understood that for all the struggles that he was having in that studio environment, that he was adding value that was different to other people. Yeah. I can't, guys, I've got so many more questions, but we will have to wrap because people will be like nodding off if we go beyond an hour. So I just wanted to end and say, thank you so much for being so candid. And I understand that it's not only a very personal topic, especially some of the things that are being shared here today, but it's very difficult to kind of separate oneself from this conversation, but I think it's going to be really valuable, like I mentioned, especially for those people who might be going through diagnosis or figuring out their place in the industry. And someone said earlier on, I think it was Lucy, said inclusivity for neurodiverse people makes things accessible for everyone, and I think that that's just a lovely note to end on. So thank you so much, and appreciate it. Thanks, team.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.